I could just see a total stranger and they say like, oh, do you do jiu-jitsu? And I was like, yeah. They're like, oh man, on Instagram, I see all these jiu-jitsu clips, or I saw that Mark Zuckerberg is doing jiu-jitsu now. What's awesome is that jiu-jitsu is a way to get a community aspect, get some combat sport and martial arts self-defense experience, physically demanding, yet you don't get punched in the face, but depending on how you train, there's a lot of things that you can do to decrease your risk of injury.
You look at people these days, it's like they're slouched over, they're looking down, they look like easy targets.
People that have done combat sports, people who have dug really deep within themselves and like grinded through something where you start like walking with your chest up a little bit more, walking with a little bit more confidence. People can pick up on that.
And we are rolling. Josh, how are you, man?
I'm doing great, Robert. How are you doing?
I'm good. Are you doing a podcast while on like a treadmill or something?
Yeah. I got one of those like under desk treadmills.
Nice.
It's dope. It helps me get my steps in.
I've had one guy just constantly emailing me, telling me that I should get that because I'm on the computer all day long. So do you find you're able to like type and everything with it, no problem?
So this one, it doesn't go too fast. It's like a walking only treadmill. So even at the fast, maybe like if I turned it all the way up to the fastest it goes, typing would be pretty difficult. But yeah, for the most part, like I think I usually set it at 1 mile an hour or maybe like 1.1 miles an hour, and typing is pretty good. I will say though, like if you're reading a lot, it's pretty tough. Like usually I turn it off when I have to like read like a lot of emails and stuff like that. But like typing, editing videos, like more monotonous type work, it's pretty convenient.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get me one. I could use that for like working on my client macros and stuff like that and get more steps in the day. So yeah, you might be selling me on it, man.
Bro, let me know how it goes. It's I set a goal a couple years ago to get 10,000 steps a day for a year, or at least average 10,000 steps a day for a year. And like throughout the year, it was up and down. Like January, February, March, I was on point. And then like as it started getting really, really hot here in Sacramento, like the average tanked again and it picked back up. And I made it to the end of the year and I looked back and my average was like 9,500. Like I barely missed it. And then that Christmas, I ended up getting a walking treadmill. And then the next year I smoked it. It was honestly too easy of a goal because you can just walk most of your work day, easily get in 12, 13,000 steps without even really trying.
I like the idea of having like the consistent effort over a year span too. Like I did you know David Webb? He's been at Super Training Gym.
Yeah, I love David. Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah. So he's a good friend of mine, and he was like, we should do a mile a day for a year. And I'm okay, I'll do that with you. So I did it with him, and I mean a mile is nothing, man. Like I can get up, run a mile on a whim, no problem. But doing it every single day without fail, like it'd be 3 feet of snow on the ground and I'm running in the middle of an ice storm or rain or whatever. I'd get home late. It'd be like midnight and I'm still going out and getting my mile in.
Oh, man.
It's like the consistent effort that you commit to. That's where it gets hard, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And I found with that goal of walking 10,000 steps a day, the quote unquote easier goals are way harder than like a goal that, at least for me, that stretches me, that like pushes me, you know, I know you've done plenty of bodybuilding shows. I did one bodybuilding show and that is that's a huge goal. Like takes all your focus. You got to get fully locked in. But if the goal is just to walk 10,000 steps a day, at least for me, I was like, oh, I don't have to like go for a walk right now. I can do it after I finish, you know, messing around on my phone for the next half hour, or I can do it later. I could always do it later. Mm-hmm. And I find that sometimes when goals are that easy to push off, like those have just as much value as setting goals like a bodybuilding show, which takes all your focus, all your intention. Can't really have a minute of your day that's focusing on something else, you know?
Yeah, and I totally agree, man. I think you have to have like these big, hairy, audacious stretch goals that just like scare you a little bit. But then you have to have like goals that most people would kind of write off, but like the consistent application of those goals every single waking day of your life, that's where it gets challenging. That's where people fall short. Like I've never been good at pull-ups. So I started doing pull-ups every single day, and I have my employees here, and we'll just like take a break at some point in the day. We'll all go knock out 35 pull-ups, like, you know, a couple sets of 7 or so. And it's been good because like it gives them a break from production, and then we all just knock out some pull-ups, and like we've actually gotten pretty freaking good. Like I got one employee that couldn't do a single pull-up, and now he's doing 35 every single day with us.
What? So, dude, that's freaking awesome.
Yeah. So I'm totally getting ahead of myself. So you and I have a mutual friend in Andrew, awesome guy. And he sent me a message saying, I got to get you on the podcast because I didn't even know you did a bodybuilding show. So you got to tell me about that. But you are big into the world of all things martial arts, right? You started out wrestling and then moved to jiu-jitsu. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I grew up doing traditional martial arts when I was a kid, and then I started wrestling in middle school and wrestled through most of high school. And the way wrestling works is like there's no hobby of wrestling. It's like you're wrestling with the full intention to compete as hard as you can. And then when you're out of high school, if you're going to wrestle, it's going to be wrestling at college. And if you're going to wrestle past college, it's wrestling towards the Olympics. And anything outside of that, there's not really much else to do. And I wasn't that great of a wrestler. I was like as average as a wrestler as you can get. And so I wasn't going to wrestle in college. And I still wanted to do something. So then I kind of found jiu-jitsu and was thinking, oh, this is a lot like wrestling. It's a little bit easier in the sense that like you don't have to do competitions every single week, throughout 4 months of the year and stuff like that. And so I got into jiu-jitsu and I absolutely loved it. And kind of all throughout that time, I'd been lifting, started lifting before I did wrestling. So like I lifted all throughout wrestling, and then I came into jiu-jitsu and just kept lifting. The bodybuilding show that I did was between the time that I stopped wrestling and the time that I started jiu-jitsu. And what was interesting was in wrestling, strength and conditioning is kind of baked in to the wrestling culture. Like wrestlers are always doing pull-ups, they're always doing rope climbs, they're always like, doing fireman carries up stadiums and stuff like that. Even though I'd say like maybe the periodization and maybe the structure of how a lot of wrestling programs run their strength and conditioning is pretty outdated, they're at least doing something. They're not doing
Like
nothing.
football, right? Like the football coaches
Yes.
in high school, kind of like doing
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The football, like a lot of football programs, like they could probably do things a little bit better, but the good thing is that they're doing something.
Yeah.
Jiu-jitsu, on the other hand, was kind of the opposite. Most grapplers, at least in the context of jiu-jitsu, weren't lifting. They weren't doing strength and conditioning. And that was kind of weird coming into it. And so I started training jiu-jitsu, and my training partners would ask me like, hey, like you feel really strong. Like, what are you doing? And I was like, well, I just lift. When I'm not here at jiu-jitsu, I'm at the gym lifting. And so they would kind of ask a couple questions. And then what I started to recognize was people would start to get injured, and then they'd really start asking questions. They're like, hey, you're into like exercise, right? And I was like, yeah. They're like, man, that guy, something about my shoulder, man. It's just like real messed up. And so I started helping a lot of my training partners through that. And that was 8 years ago. And so since then, I've really just have dived into as much as I can, helping grappling athletes get stronger, be better conditioned, help them be in better shape so that way they can do jiu-jitsu better.
Nice. How old were you when you started doing jiu-jitsu then?
I was 20. Yeah, I'm 28 now, so I started when I was 20.
Nice. See, jiu-jitsu has been one of those things that like I've always wanted to just dive into. But man, I'm tricky because like we've got jiu-jitsu mats, we got zebra mats in my gym here at the compound. We had like a year where all my employees and I were like doing striking work. We were rolling, we were figuring it all out. And then right before I started prep for my 2023 competition, one of them put me in an ankle lock and tore my LCL.
Oh,
So I'm like, okay, let's put a pause on the jiu-jitsu until at least I'm done competing. So I healed up from that, and I just haven't picked it back up because a couple different reasons. They're all excuses, but like I just had, I got two sons. One of them just turned 3, and I called, and there's a jiu-jitsu place not far from us that has like a 3 to 5 year old class. So I've been wanting to get him into it because I think that'd be super good for him, and I want to do it with him. So I've been like not doing it until we could just both start at the same time. But my problem is I'm still like deep into bodybuilding, and with my personality, like I just am an extremist with all things that I do. And I'm afraid that if I do jiu-jitsu, I won't be able to focus on the bodybuilding. But you're lifting while you're doing jiu-jitsu. Like, so do you find like if you were trying to be the best bodybuilder you could be, the jiu-jitsu probably wouldn't be conducive to that because you'd be risking unnecessary injury and overtraining, right? I would assume.
I would agree with that. I think it depends on a lot of different factors. There's, him, Nsima Yang, He's still a pro bodybuilder. He hasn't competed in a long time, but he still looks incredible. He's a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu black belt. There's another guy that trains with Nsima and I. His name's Tyler. He's still a competitive bodybuilder, and he competes in the wheelchair Mr. Olympia. I don't know if he did the last Mr. Olympia, but he definitely did the one in 2023. And when I talked to him, who's still actively competing, he has so much skill in jiu-jitsu as a black belt that he knows how to train in a very, very safe way where he can use jiu-jitsu as a little bit of his cardio work for bodybuilding. However, that kind of comes all within the context that he has such a high level of skill where he can kind of like manage his intensity really well. He knows how to keep himself safe. If someone was a beginner, I would say that, you know, if you're like in the middle of bodybuilding prep, just stick with like the Stairmaster, like treadmill. Don't use jiu-jitsu as your cardio in bodybuilding prep. Use it as something fun to do in your off season. Use it as something fun to do, like, you know, just to get you out of the gym doing something different than just bodybuilding. And as far as like staying safe with injuries and stuff, a lot of that comes from just training with training partners who know what they're doing and are able to help you like not mess yourself up, so to speak. I heard someone say this on Instagram, and I thought it was a perfect description. They said, most people think that you're like the most dangerous person to roll with is a black belt because they got all this skill. They're probably the safest person to roll with. It's actually, I know you hunt a lot. It's probably like hunting. Like the more experienced hunter you go with, they got you. Like they're not going to let you, this as best as possible. They're not going to let you mess yourself up. They're going to teach you the do's and don'ts, the etiquette and all that stuff. If you got two guys that have never hunted before, and they're like, let's just figure it out. That's usually a recipe for disaster.
Yeah,
and jiu-jitsu is very similar. So if you got two guys that, you know, don't have a whole lot of experience, the risk of injury is a lot higher. If you're training with someone that has a lot more experience, they can do a much better job of kind of funneling you in like the safest route possible to be able to learn jiu-jitsu, get a lot of benefits from it, while also not taking too much away from your bodybuilding training.
Makes total sense. What got you into like martial arts to begin with, man? Like when you started wrestling, what was the catalyst for that?
Yeah, I remember, I think I was in fifth grade. It was like the summer between fourth grade and fifth grade. And my brother and I, we had played soccer. I wasn't very good at soccer at all. We had played basketball. I was even worse at basketball. Like I just wasn't good at most sports, but I just wanted to do something. And I remember my mom, she was driving us to this martial arts school that was probably like 10 minutes away from our house. We called it karate. We had no idea that it wasn't the martial art of karate. It was called Bakfu, but we had no idea. So we're like, it's just called karate. And my mom said, okay, this summer, you guys can pick. You guys can either do karate or you guys can learn how to play the guitar. And I was like, well, I mean, playing the guitar seems dope. Doing karate seems dope. At that time, I was already watching the UFC and stuff with my uncles and stuff. And so I figured like, all right, I'll just do karate. And that's kind of how I got introduced into martial arts. And I did that from fifth grade up until the middle of high school. But also around that time was kind of when the economy crashed and things were a little bit tougher financially. And so I remember my parents had said like, hey, we can't necessarily afford for you to do martial arts year round, but your middle school has a wrestling team. So like wrestling's kind of like, you know, kind of like martial arts. How about you do that? And my dad, he's incredible. He did a lot of like research and like really invested in getting us connected with the wrestling program at our school. And he took us to the off-season practices. And I hated it. I was like, wrestling's lame. I don't want to do it. Like, this sucks, Dad. But he made my brother and I go. And then by the end of that season, I just loved wrestling. It was awesome. And so I wrestled from 8th grade through to my junior year. And then kind of had a break for a few years. And then when I was a freshman in college, that's when I started jiu-jitsu.
Nice, nice. Do you prefer jiu-jitsu as a sport, as an art, much more so than wrestling?
100%. Yeah, 100%. I had stopped wrestling because I really just didn't enjoy it anymore. Wrestling there's so many benefits from wrestling. And I think that I would go as far to say that I think all like growing boys and all young men should wrestle. And now they have some pretty established and growing women's wrestling programs. So I think wrestling for women is also incredible. But it just teaches you so much. Like not just the mental toughness side and the discipline side, but one thing that I really loved about wrestling, which I didn't care for as much about soccer and basketball, was that like you have full control over what you're doing when you go out and compete. You don't have to like do everything right, and then some dingus fumbles the football and costs you the game. Like that would just, I never played football, but if I was in that scenario, that would just drive me nuts. In wrestling, if it's like, look, if you fumble the takedown and you get pinned, like that's your fault. You know, there's no one else to blame but yourself. And I really enjoyed that. And I also really loved how wrestling was the ultimate team sport as well. You can't get better at wrestling in your room by yourself. You have to have training partners. You have to have people around you that you can actually wrestle and engage with. And so I thought that was awesome. The downsides of wrestling is I think that in the time frame that I was wrestling, being in middle school and in high school, and you're growing, you're trying to like figure out your identity and stuff, I put so much of my identity in wrestling and the winning and losing. And I've just like, that's all I focused on. And I was super competitive. So if one weekend I won a tournament, I felt great. And then another weekend, if I lost, or even if I like won most of the matches, but still lost and didn't get first place, I was just absolutely devastated. And the way wrestling is set up is that there's not really, you don't have a guaranteed spot. So it's not like, okay, you're a senior. If you're a senior playing football, you play varsity football. In wrestling, they do challenge matches where basically they have all the weight classes. In high school, there's 14 different weight classes, and every week they have wrestle-offs. So basically they run a tournament within the school itself, and then the best person in each weight class is the person that wrestles. So every week you're battling for your spot to wrestle varsity. And if you're varsity, you got to like defend that spot every single week. And if you're not varsity, then you're challenging every single week for that spot. And it was super competitive, and there's a lot of benefit to that. Yet I also think that that kind of drove me to not love wrestling as much because of just, you know, you put your identity only into winning and losing, and you don't put your identity in other things. It's a very, your identity is built on a very shaky foundation because not everyone can win everything all the time. I mean, maybe if you're Michael Jordan, but there's only one Michael Jordan. And so I ended up not wrestling my senior year and just like trying to figure things out and just trying to figure out like, man, what am I going to do with my life? What am I going to do with who I am as a person? I was lifting before I was wrestling, and I lifted all the time during wrestling. And so I just kept lifting after I stopped wrestling, and I loved it. Like strength and conditioning, learning about strength and conditioning, bodybuilding, all that stuff was so much fun. And so I just stuck with that. And that's kind of what funneled me into doing that one bodybuilding show. And after the bodybuilding show, I definitely wanted to do more, but there's still part of me that was like, I don't necessarily want to like step into the super hyper competitive, hyper intense pressure cooker of wrestling, but I got to do something. I got to do some form of combat sport. I got to do some form of martial arts. And so that's when I ended up finding Jiu Jitsu. I only wrestled for 4 years, and I've done Jiu Jitsu for 8 years, and I love it. I still love wrestling. Like there's aspects of wrestling that I enjoy, but I love Jiu Jitsu way more.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I did a bunch of team sports in like middle school and, you know, basketball, baseball, stuff like that, a little bit of football, but I never really enjoyed it all that much because I like the individual sports. I like it when, you know, the buck stops with you, you're, you know, reaping what you sow. That's why I think I was drawn to bodybuilding so much, because like I'm the one putting in the work. It's totally an individual sport. But wrestling or jiu-jitsu is kind of like a blend of both worlds because it's an individual sport, but you have to have a good sparring partner, and there's like a team component to it in a regard. So like it's the perfect hybrid, so to speak.
100%. 100%. I had a coach in high school who said, he said, wrestling is the ultimate team sport because you share your wins and you own your losses. And so he would make that speech kind of like the start of every season. He'd say like, hey, there's going to be like everybody here is probably going to win at least one wrestling match. And there's going to be guys that are going to win a lot more wrestling matches, the better guys on the team. And if you're winning a lot, remember, you share your wins with everyone else. You did not get there on your own. You were not a self-made man. You accomplished those wins thanks to all the training partners that contributed to your success. And if you lose, there's no one else to blame but yourself. So if you lose, like, don't come back to us as the coaches and say, "Oh, I lost because of, so and so did this or whatever." It's like, we don't care. We're not going to listen to it. You own you own your losses and you share your wins, and that's was super impactful for me because I think like, what better way to kind of set up young men for life with that kind of mentality of like, hey, if you make a mistake, if you fall short, like you got to take ownership for that and you got to deal with it. And yet if you have a success, it's also important to recognize like, look, you probably didn't hit that success all on your own. There were other people, there were other things that helped contribute to that allowed you to be in that position to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like when I'm looking at how I want to parent my sons now, I feel like that would be an awesome outlet for them to learn. Because like I've learned so much through bodybuilding, like hard work, dedication, discipline, consistency. But you could learn all those same things through, a combat sport or jiu-jitsu, but have also that team element where you're having to learn more about how to talk to people, how to interact with people, how to like let your ego get in check. So yeah, it's pretty powerful, man.
100%. 100%. I think for kids, it's also great too. Even though I didn't do jujitsu when I was a kid, I did other martial arts, which was still physical, but just like getting used to being physical with another person in a controlled way that's not automatically 100% like balls to the wall, the hardest fight ever. I think that's important to learn as a kid. At least for me, it made me more comfortable, at least a little bit, with confrontation. And not that I got in any fights in school, but you just start to build a little bit more confidence. Like if someone were to get in your face for something, it's not like the scariest thing in the entire world. Or if someone were to, grab you and mess around a little bit, it's not like the most alarming thing in the world. You're used to just interacting with other people. You're used to engaging with other people. And I can see for myself how that was beneficial as a kid. I don't have any kids yet, but my wife and I are thinking like, yeah, when we have kids someday, that aspect alone may be beneficial, like how to interact with other people in that context.
I think it's huge, man. Like nobody really ever messes with me. Like I've never been in a legitimate fist fight except with my younger brother. And like I don't have any combat sport training, but I feel like people don't mess with me because I carry myself confidently and I know how to talk to people and communicate. And I feel like if you you look at people these days, it's like they're slouched over, they're looking down, they look like easy targets. But if you like have confidence in yourself, if you know how to communicate effectively, which are all things you would learn through jiu-jitsu, you can just bypass all that negativity on the front end.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a weird thing how like I've heard some people say like, "Oh, you walk like a wrestler." It's like, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. And I think sometimes some people mean like you got bad posture and like your shoulders are internally rotated. And it's like, okay, yeah, I probably should work on a little bit more mobility. But I think there's also the other aspect of like, yeah, people that have wrestled or people that have done combat sports, or not even specific to those things, but people who have dug really deep within themselves and like grinded through multiple hard bodybuilding preps, grinded through multiple long hunting trips and like packing out an animal and all that stuff. I think that in a way kind of fixes your posture where you start like walking with your chest up a little bit more, walking with a little bit more confidence. And that, even though it may not be like the most obvious thing, it's like a subconscious thing. Like people can pick up on that.
100%, man. So with you having been in jiu-jitsu, you said 8 years now total?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like there's been this like hockey stick trend upward in its popularity, like in the last, I would say 3 to 4 years? Because like, and maybe it's correlated with Joe Rogan because he starts talking about things like, I noticed that with bow hunting, like bow hunting wasn't popular. And then he started having Cam Hanes on his episodes a lot. And Cam Hanes, obviously a super prominent bow hunter. And now everybody wants to be a bow hunter. And I think the same thing is happening with jiu-jitsu, where it's like everybody's now wanting to go roll and emulate that. But have you noticed that as someone that's been in the space for so long?
100%. 100%. I started jiu-jitsu because I was listening to Joe Rogan and Jocko Willink and all that. And even when I started, it was still kind of like, I don't want to say it was underground per se, but it just wasn't mainstream. It just wasn't like, I still had to explain to people, like when I first started jiu-jitsu, I'd go to like Christmas Eve and my aunts would say like, hey, like, what are you up to? And I'd say, oh, I'm doing jiu-jitsu. And they're like, oh, is that like karate? And it's like, no, it's like kind of like wrestling. But anyways, they had no idea. But now when I go to Christmas Eve or whatever, I could just see a total stranger and they say like, oh, do you do jujitsu? And I was like, yeah. They're like, oh man, on Instagram, I see all these jujitsu clips, or I saw that Mark Zuckerberg is doing jujitsu now. So it definitely has kind of had like this explosion. And I think what's cool about that is that that's like the tide that raises all ships. I know for me, that's been great for my own business. The more people that are doing jujitsu is like, the more people I have an opportunity to help, the more people I have an opportunity to work with. And I think what's awesome is that jujitsu is a way to get a community aspect, get some combat sport and martial arts self-defense experience. I know there's people out there that say that jujitsu is not great for self-defense, and maybe like the sport jujitsu where you're like spinning upside down and like doing the splits and stuff, that may not be like the most effective self-defense, but like if you know how to strangle somebody, you know how to like break joints, like that's pretty solid. But you get like the community aspect, you get the self-defense aspect, you get like a lot of good like physical interaction, like it's physically demanding, yet you don't get punched in the face. There are injuries in it, but depending on how you train, there's a lot of things that you can do to decrease your risk of injury. You know, if you're going to be doing stand-up stuff, you can decrease your risk of injury a lot, but there's still a risk that you're going to get clipped with something and get some sort of concussion, either a minor concussion or a major concussion. In jiu-jitsu, if you're training smart, you leave your ego at home and you're not trying to be a hero and like wait till the very last second to tap to something. You can go pretty hard without necessarily having that high of a risk of injury. So I think a lot of those things contributed to what's made it so popular. And then it also helps that like MMA is getting more popular. Not everyone's going to do MMA, but there's a lot more people that watch MMA that might do jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu competitions are growing and getting more exciting and more engaging from a production value. So I think there's a lot of things that contribute to that hockey stick effect that we've seen over the last couple of years.
Is there like it's like some unspoken jiu-jitsu etiquette that I would need to know before just walking into a dojo and be like, all right, I'm signing up? Like, what do I need to know so I don't make a fool of myself?
Yeah, honestly, like just be cool, you know, which you're already a cool guy. Like, I think there's like hygiene etiquette. So like, you know, it's definitely a good idea to trim your fingernails. That way you don't like accidentally scratch somebody. Like, not that anyone would ever intentionally like try to claw somebody, but if your fingernails are a little bit long, it's good to trim those. You know, don't walk on the mat with your shoes on, because like you don't want the rocks from your shoes to like dig into the mat and mess up the mats and stuff. If you already have zebra mats, like I'm sure you're already aware, like those things are pretty pricey. They're really nice. Mm-hmm. So like as much as possible, like keep them clean, you know, keep take care of them, stuff like that. And then honestly, like just you're already a cool guy, and based on like what you do in life, like with all the hunting, the bodybuilding, entrepreneurship, and all that stuff, you already have like, I don't believe you would be a guy that goes in with this giant ego, you know, like you're just going in like, hey, like what can I learn? How can I get better today? And there's that side, which we can consciously like do our best to be prepared for. But then there's like all these unconscious things that kind of just get fixed with time. So like when I first started doing jiu-jitsu, I would tense up a lot. Like I'd tense up and hold my breath, and that would just completely gas me out. And that's something that you kind of learn over time of like, okay, I probably don't need to tense up really hard in every exchange. I can learn how to relax a little bit. There's other things. I heard someone say like, hey, if something's not working, doing it more aggressively and harder probably isn't the answer. So that was helpful for me. Like, okay, if this technique isn't working, even though I'm strong, I probably don't need to just rip on it as hard as I can to try to figure it out to make it work. There might be another like detail that I'm missing that could make it work a little bit better. But yeah, other than that, it's like, just be cool, which you already are, and you'll be just fine.
Yeah, I'll try and be cool for sure. I'm afraid that like, cause I come from bodybuilding, like I would have a natural tendency to just try to use my strength and overdo it in that regard, as opposed to like actually, you know, technique fixating on that. Cause the cool thing about jiu-jitsu is you can have somebody that's 115 pounds and scrawny as hell just totally wipe the floor with somebody that's twice as heavy as them. but it's like that's all technique, it's not muscle that's
Hmm.
moving, that's technique. So I got to just like fixate on that and not rely on the muscle and strength that I've built over decades to try and compensate, basically.
I think I hear what you're saying, and I think unfortunately jiu-jitsu has created a bad stigma around using strength. And that's kind of what made it popular was like, oh yeah, Hoist Gracie won the first UFC. He wasn't as big and as jacked as some of those other guys, and he submitted all of them, which that is incredible. And that was awesome to see. But I think that message has kind of gotten muddled that like, oh, you don't need strength. And it's like, whoa, let's pump the brakes. That 115-pound guy, like he'll mop up a dude that's bigger than him that doesn't know jujitsu. A bigger guy that knows jujitsu, he's cooked. Like he's
Yeah.
getting smashed. And so when people come into jiu-jitsu that are already strong, usually I just encourage them like, hey, you're going to kind of find that you're going to do things a little bit harder and apply a lot more force than most everyone else that has been doing jiu-jitsu. So just try to like intentionally slow down a little bit and just keep like an idea in your head of like, if I'm doing a rowing motion more than 70%, like I might be going and it's not working, I might be going a little too hard. I probably don't need to row like, rip an arm drag, which is kind of looks like a rowing movement. Probably don't need to rip that 100%. Could probably like try to figure it out at around 70%. And then
Makes
the other
sense.
thing that helps too is just breathing a lot more. When we tense up and like brace, we're getting ready to like be really explosive. But if you just kind of slow down your breathing a little bit, try to relax a little bit, you can still be strong. You can still, move fluidly and be really effective, but you're not you're not as spazzy, if that makes sense. And I think
Totally.
honestly, like one of the best examples of this is Nsima. Nsima's a black belt. He started training a little bit before I did, and he's like 240, 250 pounds. He's huge, but he moves really, really well. And if you watch him train, he doesn't really like grunt very much. He doesn't really like, you don't really see a lot of like intensity in his face. It doesn't look like he's lifting. And I think sometimes like when people come from lifting and they are super strong, which is great, that's like a huge asset to have and like a great part of athleticism to have. Sometimes they kind of just take how they would lift something like an explosive row or explosive press. They do that for everything. When maybe there's a little bit better rep balance to be had. Like, hey, there's a time to be explosive, but a lot of the time, like, try to be a little bit more relaxed, try to be a little bit more fluid, and go from there.
You roll with Nsima?
I don't roll with them too often. No, no.
No.
So I mostly train no gi, so like no pajamas, and Nsima trains mostly in the gi. So occasionally, if I'm showing up to a gi training session and he's there, we might roll. Nsima is awesome, but there are also like for myself, there are times where like I go in with something very specific that I'm gonna work on, and sometimes Nsima and I will work on those like at least for me, there's this thing called the constraints-led approach to jiu-jitsu. We have like very specific training constraints to develop certain skills. And that may not always work with what Nsima's working on or a competition he's prepping for, but we roll occasionally. I wouldn't say I train with him all the time.
So with the gi or no gi, like is that just kind of like more purist versus more practical? Like what's kind of like the ideology around the gi versus no gi?
So to my understanding, jiu-jitsu originated from judo and they wore the gi. And then when MMA got popular, it didn't make sense to wear the gi because no one's wearing the gi in MMA, or at least after the first few years of MMA, no one was wearing the gi. And that's where no gi kind of became more popular. It's like, hey, why are we learning how to strangle someone with their collars if we're training for an MMA fight and they don't have any collars? We might as well just try to learn all the same stuff, but without the use of the fabric. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of where it branched off. And there are a lot of guys that do both. Like I know I started doing like a even split, like 50% of the days when I started jiu-jitsu were no gi, 50% were in the gi. Now it's like 95-5. Like every couple weeks I might do one gi session. But because I came from wrestling, which we just wore a singlet, it was just a smoother transition just to mostly focus on no gi.
Yeah. Because I guess with the gi training, like you're pretty much making your decisions based off of them wearing that. So like all of your hand positioning is all around the collar. Like it just totally changes where you're grabbing. I mean, it changes everything, I guess.
Yeah, it does change a lot. Like there's specific grips. Like if you were to try to grab someone's tricep like this, like it would be really hard to control someone because like might be able to get it, but it's kind of easy for them to just pull their arm off. But if you grab like the sleeve, that's a super strong grip that you can have on the back of someone's tricep. That's pretty hard for them to break. So there's little things like that, like different grips. There's different submissions too that you can do. But I'd say like probably 70% of it crosses over between both. Like all the principles around like, hey, if we're going to protect our neck, the principles of protecting your neck, whether you're wearing a gi or no gi, are pretty similar. You want to defend your neck. You want to make sure their hands aren't getting around and under your chin, stuff like that. So there's quite a bit of crossover.
Makes sense. What do you look for? This is a selfish question, but what do you look for in like a good quality school or dojo for jiu-jitsu? Like what do I need to keep in mind when because there's one that I know is relatively reputable, like 25 minutes from me. I'm kind of in the middle of the country though. Like should I shop around or what would you base that off of?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I think it's great to shop around, like take as many trial classes as you want at all the gyms in town. And I never thought of this because I don't have any kids, but one guy that I train with, someone asked him this question on a podcast, and he said, look at their kids program. If their kids program is really strong, that's a great sign. Because if there's a lot of parents that trust this instructor or this group of instructors consistently enough to bring their kids there 2 to 3 times a week, that's a really good sign. That's a good sign that they know what they're doing. They got their business taken care of. They create a good environment for kids to learn in. That's going to transfer better to adults. It doesn't always work on the other side. It's like there may be a gym that has like a ton of competitors, a ton of MMA fighters, and they might have some kids classes, but it's like some teenager that doesn't know what he's doing, having kids. It's like rock'em sock'em robots on the mat and stuff. That may not be the best place unless that's what you're looking for. Like when I first started jiu-jitsu, I trained at an MMA gym. I didn't have any kids. I was like, I don't care what the kids class is like I'm just going to throw down. But like what you said, if the goal is to do it with your son, I'd err on the side of like find a place that has a really good established kids program. And then all the other things too, like if you walk in and it smells clean and it looks clean, that's a great sign. If you walk in and like the bathrooms are an absolute mess, like there's sweat everywhere and no one mops up, like I'd say like that's a little bit of a red flag. There's also some stuff. Thankfully, the place that I train at isn't like this at all. And I didn't even know about this until after I'd already been doing jiu-jitsu for a couple years. But there are some places that are a little bit, for lack of a better term, they're just a little bit cultish. Like the instructor wants you to only wear a white gi with the school patch on it. You can't wear anything else. And you have to when you tie your belt, you have to face away from the mat and you have to ask to use the bathroom before you leave. Like I understand that for kids, like you want to build like a culture of respect and a culture of discipline and all that stuff. But once you're an adult, like you're a grown ass man. I'm a grown ass man. I'm not asking anyone to go to the bathroom. Like if I got to go to the bathroom, I'm going to the bathroom. I'm not going to be like bowing to a picture of a dead guy on the wall or any like weird stuff like that. So there's some stuff that has kind of transferred over from like super, super old school traditional Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which I don't, the place I train at now, Cassio, he's from Brazil and he's awesome. Like we bow at the end of class, just as like not like as any weird thing, but just like, hey, class is over, bow out, that's it. But he doesn't care like what gi you wear. He doesn't care if you go to the bathroom. Like he's pretty chill about all that stuff.
Nice. Yeah, cool deal, man. Yeah, I'll check it out for sure. I'm assuming with like a 3 to 5 year old age group for them, they're doing like just basics. Like they're not going to be strangle holding on week 2, I wouldn't think.
No. I think what's cool about jiu-jitsu for little kids is that it's oftentimes like gymnastics with a little bit of like grappling involved. like a lot of tumbling, a lot of like somersaults and stuff like that, with a little bit of like, hey, this is how, you do a takedown, or this is how you do whatever.
Nice. So anything is better than nothing, obviously, but like how many days a week would one need to commit to going after it to like see a measurable improvement, and not like overdo it necessarily, but like not just tipping their toe in?
That's a great question. I think this is one of the biggest mistakes a lot of people make when they first start jiu-jitsu, especially if they're like someone like you and me, where like once we catch the bug on something, like it's all gas, no brakes on that one thing. And I think a lot of times people will go way too hard, way too fast, where they like try to train 4 or 5 days a week at jiu-jitsu, and they physically haven't caught up to be able to handle that kind of workload or that kind of training volume. And we could almost look at it as like, if someone wanted to go running and they haven't ran before, and they're like, oh, I watched this David Goggins video. He ran 100 miles. Well, I'll just do half that. I'll run 50 miles. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa.
I did that same thing. I listened to his podcast and I signed up for a marathon on the spot.
Oh, no. I didn't mean to blast you out like that. But there does need to be a slight progression in how much time you're spending on the mat if you want to be able to do it for a long period of time. So for someone who's just starting jiu-jitsu, if they're in decently good shape, I'd say like 2 days a week is perfect. Like 2 days a week, if you could do that every week for say like 2 to 3 months and are able to successfully recover well, you could probably do more. But if you're, like you said, your main goal is to like still be competitive as a bodybuilder and still make strides in that, I think doing more than 2 days a week might have a negative impact on that. After a few months though, once you get familiar enough with it, you will also get much better at kind of auto-regulating your training. So with some guys that I coach, I've noticed that the guys that are more experienced, they can have a lot of days on the mat and recover pretty well because they're just so much better at auto-regulating training. With the people you coach, maybe you've experienced this where someone's brand new to the gym and it's like, hey, we're going to have you go to the gym twice a week and we'll have you do like lighter stuff at home the other days of the week. That way you're still doing physical activity, but you really only have like 2 hard workouts. It's once someone is more experienced and they've gotten a better handle of the gym, you might have them go to the gym 5 days a week, but they kind of intuitively know, okay, days 1 and 4 are the days I really push it. Days 2, 3, and 5, a little bit lighter. Still able to get some good work in, but I'm better able to manage intensity and manage my fatigue and stuff like that. So jiu-jitsu works very similarly. Say 2 days a week to start is pretty solid. And then the other thing too is when it comes to the live sparring aspect, you definitely don't have to spar every single round. I think that's another thing that messes people up. They're not used to doing that much live grappling and they feel like they have to do every single round. I'd say like the first few weeks, just do half and then, do a round, take a round off, watch, do another round, take a round off and watch. But then as you get a little bit more familiar, you start to get used to like the rigors and the stresses of grappling, start doing more rounds, maybe add another day of jiu-jitsu. I think when jiu-jitsu guys ask me, oh, how many days should I go to the gym? I say, just go to the gym as many days as you can every week, just as long as it doesn't negatively impact your jiu-jitsu training and negatively impact your overall recovery. For some guys, that's 2 days. For some guys, that's 4 days. And I think looking at it from the flip side of the coin is also very similar. So if you're bodybuilding and you're, lifting and all that stuff, go to jiu-jitsu as many days as you can per week, just as long as it doesn't have any negative impact on your bodybuilding training. When you're just starting out, that may be 2 days a week. If you're someone like my guy Tyler, who's a black belt and competes at Mr. Olympia, he can probably go to jiu-jitsu every day and do something and be totally fine. But that comes with experience, comes with having a better understanding of auto-regulation and all that stuff.
Nice. No, it makes total sense. So like with you personally, you're still lifting, you're rolling. How do you structure like nuts and bolts of your training split, jiu-jitsu split, nutrition? Like how are you structuring everything?
Yeah. So right now I'm only training jiu-jitsu about twice a week. Things have been pretty busy with work and I just finished a big bulk. So I was like, I'm leveraging as much time as I can to be in the gym. But like on average, I'd say I go to the gym about 3 to 4 days a week, and I'm going to jiu-jitsu on average about 3 to 4 days a week. When I was
Nice.
competing, I was going to the gym a little bit less and going to jiu-jitsu a lot more. In 2020, when I didn't have jiu-jitsu, I was going to the gym a lot more because that's all I could do. But for me, a typical week of training, I structure it using the condensed conjugate split. So, conjugate system came from a lot of the strength coaches in the Soviet Union, then got really popular in the United States in powerlifting circles and guys like Louis Simmons. And basically, the conjugate system is focusing on using three main training methods. You have your max effort method, your dynamic effort method, and your repetition effort method. The max effort method, you can almost think of like that's the heavy strength work. It looks like working up to a 3-rep max on some big compound lifts, squat, bench press, deadlift, overhead press, stuff like that. Dynamic effort method is most of your speed and explosive power work. So that could be speed bench press or speed squats, but it could also include other things like jumping, med ball slams, kettlebell swings. If you got some hills, you can do hill sprints, stuff like that. And then the repetition effort method is kind of like the glue that puts those two things together. You have your bodybuilding training, a little bit more of your GPP or general physical preparedness or general fitness work. And so throughout the week, I make sure that I'm checking all three of those boxes. And the condensed conjugate model is something I picked up from Phil DeRue. He's a MMA strength and conditioning coach. And that's basically a way of how you can combine some of those methods in your workouts to try to check all those boxes throughout the week. So one workout may look like a max effort lower, dynamic effort upper. So we'll start the workout with something really heavy for the lower body. That may be some sort of squat, some sort of deadlift, or some sort of good morning, working up to a 1 to 5 rep max. We'll pick 1 to 2 secondary exercises. So like say we do a squat and we work up to a heavy triple or a heavy set of 3. I'm not necessarily trying to like always hit the biggest eyeball popping, gut busting, heaviest set ever, but I want to hit some heavy weight. I want to do something heavy, strain against some heavy loads for that workout. So say we start with the squat. Secondary exercises might be like some sort of lunge or some sort of unilateral heavy lower body movement for 4 to 6 sets, 4 to 6 reps. That kind of covers the max effort method for the lower body. Then we'll move to the upper body and do all of our speed and explosive power work. So plow push-ups, med ball slams, maybe even like some speed bench press. There's a bunch of different things that you can do with that. And that'll be one workout. So we check 2 of those boxes. And then the next workout may look like the exact opposite. So max effort upper, dynamic effort lower. So we hit the heavy bench press for 3 reps, do some heavy pull-ups, heavy rows. Then we do something fast and explosive for the lower body. Sprints, jumps, banded kettlebell swings, stuff like that. And then on day 3, this is something that I picked up from Mark Bell. I like to call those the jacked and tan days, where it's just all bodybuilding stuff. So you're hitting all your repetition effort method exercises. That could be like gangstering out on arms. It really can be like as deep into bodybuilding as you want to take it. And then some other guys that I coach, they're not as much of a meathead as myself. So I have them do a little bit more like circuit-based stuff. But the goal is really just to get a lot of blood flow, get a crazy pump, leave the gym feeling better than when you walked in. And so those are kind of like the 3 main workouts that I do. And I'll kind of like swap in different exercises, swap in like different sets and reps just based on whatever the overall training goal is. So if I'm bulking and like going through a big hypertrophy phase, some of those max effort movements may be large range of motion, trying to get a really big, deep stretch, exercises that may not be the absolute best for overall strength, but are really, really good for hypertrophy. So instead of doing like a 3-rep max box squat, which could be great for strength, I might do like an 8-rep max hack squat, or maybe an 8-rep max RDL or stiff leg deadlift. If the goal is to prep for competition, some of the guys that I'm coaching are gearing up to compete at Master Worlds here in a couple weeks. We're really trying to focus on getting a really big strength stimulus without having a lot of wear and tear. So that might look like a trap bar deadlift, but they let go of the bar at the top, so they don't have as much eccentric loading. That may look like split squats with overcoming isometrics. So they like get a barbell, get into a split squat position, but just rip into the pins as hard as possible. They're able to get a huge training stimulus, but not necessarily have a whole lot of wear and tear. So that way they have plenty of energy to go train hard at jiu-jitsu. So the condensed conjugate model is like the outline that I typically use for myself and a lot of the athletes that I coach. And then we dive into the specific exercises and sets and reps just based on whatever their training goals are or their training needs are.
And do you alternate those days with your jiu-jitsu training? So like, heavy day, then your jiu-jitsu, then the dynamic day and split, or how do you have that weaved in?
So it depends on the athlete. For me, since I'm only doing 2 jiu-jitsu days per week, I lift only on one day and then I go to jiu-jitsu on another day. Other seasons of life where I'm doing a lot more jiu-jitsu, I'll double up where I lift heavy in the morning and then go roll hard later in the day. And depending on what that looks like, I try to use, I think some people call it the high-low method, and I've also heard some people call it the 48 to 72 hour rule, where we just put high stimulus training days throughout the week, separated by about 48 to 72 hours. So instead of doing a really hard workout on Monday and then a really hard jiu-jitsu session on Tuesday, and then trying to do another really hard workout on Wednesday, that can work early in the week. But by the time you get to the end of the week, you've accumulated so much fatigue that it's going to be really hard to give it your best on Friday and Saturday. If you combined your hard workout with your hard jiu-jitsu session on Monday, and then take things a little bit easier on Tuesday, that gives you a little bit more time to recover. So that way you're ready to hit it hard again on Wednesday. So that is typically how I set it up for myself and then the athletes that I coach. If they're doing so much jiu-jitsu to where they're going to have some double days where they're lifting heavy and rolling hard in the same day, we use that high-low method where we have a day that's high stimulus followed by a day that's low stimulus, or at least a day where they're able to get a little bit more recovery. So that way they don't accumulate as much fatigue throughout the week.
Makes sense. How long are your sessions on average for the training and the jiu-jitsu?
For me, I love being in the gym. So I'm there at least for like 90 minutes and sometimes longer. And then jiu-jitsu is usually like 90 minutes to 2 hours. But for athletes that I'm coaching that like jiu-jitsu is their main thing, I try to make sure their workouts are no longer than 75 minutes. It's like, I know like how people say like, oh, serum testosterone starts to drop off after about 75 minutes of exercise and all that stuff. But I just love being in the gym. So I'd rather like be in the gym as long as possible, even though I know like they may not always be conducive to what science says. I just love being in the gym. So for me personally, my workouts are a little long. My jiu-jitsu sessions are a little long, but this is what I do and this is what I love doing. For someone else that either has a tighter schedule or maybe doesn't enjoy lifting as much, you definitely don't need to be in the gym for 90 plus minutes to get a good training stimulus. Like a lot of guys that I coach, their workouts are 45 to 60 minutes tops, and then they're doing jiu-jitsu for 60, 75 minutes a day.
Nice. Tell me about this bulk you just did. What was the motivation behind that?
Oh man, I just finished a cut. Even though I'm not competing in bodybuilding, the stuff that I learned from doing that bodybuilding show has been amazing. Like learning how to get really, really lean and really, really shredded, I think is a skill that a lot of people should have, or at least like dabble in a little bit. And so last spring, I was kind of like going through a lot of maintenance in my training. And I'd love to hear from you too, if you've ever experienced this, where sometimes things with work and just other stuff going on in life, like get so crazy that training is just like, I'm just going to like just maintain. And my gym sessions are just going to be about maintaining, making sure that I'm constantly putting up points on the scoreboard, not missing any workouts, but realistically, I'm not going to like put my full intent to like PR my squat or something like that. And so I was kind of in that maintenance phase for a little bit too long, where after a while I realized like, I gotta like turn up the heat and do something. If I'm not going to be competing in jiu-jitsu, I at least got to be able to push myself in the gym. And so I just set a goal of like, I'm just going to get crazy shredded, get as lean as I possibly can. And so I did that. And then at the end of that, I maintained for a little while. And I'm sure every bodybuilder or anyone that loves gym culture kind of goes through this. You love the part where you're actively getting leaner and leaner and leaner. And then you stay lean for like 6 to 8 weeks and you realize like, man, I feel kind of weak. I should probably try to get big. So then you start bulking up again. That's basically what I did. So I bulked for 24 weeks. And then the last 12 weeks have just been maintenance, which I feel pretty good, but I'm also ready to start leaning out again. So
Are
probably
you
start that here pretty soon.
like tracking macros and conscious of how many calories you're eating in a bulk and versus a cut and stuff like that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I've done a few different diets, some that were really heavy on tracking, some that were a little bit more intuitive, some that were a little bit more restrictive, where it's like, hey, I can eat as much as I want, but I'm just not eating these particular foods or whatever the case may be. And over the years, I've found that for me, tracking macros has been what's worked best just for my overall athletic development, because I know very specifically of like, hey, this is how much I need to feel and perform my best. Like I know, like I've tested it. I know that when I have 30 to 40 grams of fast digestible carbohydrates right before jiu-jitsu, I feel really, really, really good. I also know that when I have, much higher carbs and a lot lower fat, like a more traditional bodybuilding style diet, I feel really, really good. I also know, on the other hand, that there are specific foods that tend to mess up my digestion a little bit or cause me to not feel as good. So kind of like the outline that I use for a lot of people that I coach is like, before we start tracking macros, let's just get your food selection on point. Like for the next 8 to 12 weeks, I only want you to eat what has a mom or comes from the ground, and then get 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And they might say like, well, coach, what about this, this, and this? It's like, does it have a mom? Like, well, it came in a box at the grocery store. It's like, okay, well, yeah, you should probably like skip that for the next 8 to 12 weeks. So I kind of build out that foundation. And then based on those foods, those nutrient dense whole food sources, then we kind of move into tracking macros. And it's like, one guy might say, hey, I'm following the diet. Like I can see that I'm getting leaner and decreasing body fat, but I just always feel so exhausted at jiu-jitsu. It's like, all right, well, what are you eating before jiu-jitsu? And they're like, God, nothing. It's like, okay, well, maybe have a little bit of fruit, maybe have some nuts in there, just something to get a little bit of fuel for that training session. And so that's kind of the template that I use for a lot of people that I coach. And then that's also the same template that I use for myself. So most of the food is nutrient dense, whole food sources. I'm a big fan of Stan Efferding's vertical diet and all those foods, so like a lot of red meat, a lot of white rice, different things like carrots, cranberry juice, spinach for different micronutrients, and then just making sure that my macros are structured in a way that kind of keeps some guardrails on not eating too much to where the bulk is going a little too fast, where I'm gaining too much body fat, or if I'm leaning out, I'm still getting in plenty of calories to sustain the training that I need throughout the week.
How much higher on calories did you go with your bulk, and like how much weight did you gain in that 24-week span?
So before, I typically would just do like the standard like NSCA recommendation of like, you need to be in a weekly caloric surplus of 3,500 calories per week and all that stuff. And then I listened to Dan Garner. He's Sean O'Malley's nutritionist. He's also a nutritionist for a lot of different hockey players and MMA fighters. And he had like the simplest calculation, which I thought was so genius. He said, maintenance calories is probably your body weight times 15. And then to be in a surplus, it's probably your body weight times 16. And to be in a deficit, it's probably your body weight times 14. And so that's what I did. So I just took my body weight times 15, ran that to get my total caloric intake. And then once I had those total calories for the day, took out my protein, which was 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, then plugged in my fat, which for me, I prefer to have a little bit lower fat, 0.3 to 0.4 grams of fat per pound of body weight, and then just filled the rest with carbohydrates. So I ran that for maintenance and weighed myself every day for a couple weeks to make sure like, yeah, my weight hasn't really fluctuated that much. This is probably pretty close to maintenance. And then when I started the bulk, I just took my body weight times 15, kept the same ratios as far as protein and fat goes, and just added more carbohydrates. When I was going through a cutting phase or leaning out, do the exact same thing. Keep fat and protein pretty much the same, and then just decrease carbohydrates.
I like it. So you said times 15 for maintenance? I'm curious what it shows me in. What do you weigh?
I weigh 177.
Okay, so we're pretty much the same thing. I'm at 180 right now.
Okay.
That's got me at 2,700 calories maintenance. And I'm typically 3,000 to 3,300 calories and holding pretty stable on weight. So pretty close ballpark there, depending on everyone's activity level or so. But
Nice.
I like it, man.
Well,
Keeping it
actually,
simple.
you just did like a 4,000 calorie
Yeah,
surplus, right?
I did a high fat because everybody's been talking about the sugar diet. I don't know if you've seen any of that stuff on there. So
Yeah, yeah.
Mark's been talking about it a lot. I had Mark on the podcast yesterday, actually. But yeah, I wanted to basically do that to mirror, from a metabolic pathway standpoint, the FGF21 by way of minimizing protein consumption and replacing what everyone else is using sugars for with higher dietary fat.
Mm.
So I put myself at an additional, 1,000 calories roughly above baseline for that, and my weight held stable because I'm not trying to lose weight right now. But so that was super interesting, but it was just a lot of fat and not very much protein, man. So I wouldn't recommend that as like a long-term strategy by any means. But I'm always experimenting with something and playing around with metabolism in some form or fashion. It's interesting stuff.
Yeah. I think the stuff that you're doing with what I've seen from your podcast and then the times you've been on Mark Bell's Power Project is the stuff that you're doing with keto, I think is freaking sick. And I think a lot of times, I heard Mark had this guy on the podcast. His name is Joel. Oh, shoot. I can't, Joel Veep or something. Anyway, he said every diet works, but not every diet works forever. And his take was like the people that are like super anti-keto, super anti-carnivore, it's like they're not looking at it within the right context of how, in what context it can work. They're looking at it like, does that work forever? No. So we should never use it. It's like, well, that's probably not the best way to look at it. Just like how some of those same people might be big proponents of if it fits your macros, and people are like, hey, I'll have it if it fits my macros. I'll just get all my carbs from Pop-Tarts and all my, just eat beef jerky sticks and protein shakes and I'm good to go. And that can work a little bit for something, but it's not going to work forever. And I think what's so cool about what you've been doing is that with all the experiments you've done and with your history, you've been following a ketogenic diet for like over a decade, right?
Yeah, coming up on 11 years now.
Man, dude, that's freaking sick. It's been awesome to see your experiments and the results that have come from that. Like if someone were to take this lifestyle for a decade and be completely fat adapted, would you say you're completely fat adapted? Like 10 years, that's probably right.
I don't know if you can get any more fat adapted.
But it's awesome to see. And I think it's just dope to see how the ketogenic diet can be implemented once it's used. Like it seems like it provides more and more benefits as time goes on and on and on. If someone were just a crash diet with a keto diet for 12 weeks and then go back to what they were eating before, like maybe it'd help them out, but I don't know.
I mean, the body's very adaptable. And like in my case, and for people that are doing strict keto long term, like your body builds up those metabolic pathways and it can perform at a high level with them. You just have to give yourself ample time to get adapted. But then I think where people make the mistake, and this is true regardless of the diet they're following, is they spend, too much time in a surplus or too much time in a deficit. And there's no such thing as maintenance. Like you're either getting better or worse. And one of the things that bodybuilding taught me, which sounds like same for you, is like there's so much metabolic benefit to having some time at a surplus and some time at a deficit. And you can do that in the context of the same dietary protocol, but just by changing the amounts that you're consuming. And from a metabolic standpoint, like that is where most people just totally miss the boat. Like whether you compete or not, there's benefit to being at a surplus for a strategic period of time and for being in a deficit in a strategic period of time.
Nice. I agree. It's like, it seems like as people jump on some of the diets that get a little bit more popular, and maybe if they're newer to nutrition or newer to health and fitness, they might think that they have to prescribe to it forever. And it's like, hey, it's going to work until you need to make some changes. So get ready to make some changes once, having only ribeyes for a year straight may kind of play itself out and may need to implement some new stuff or whatever the case may be.
It's cool for me to see the different diets work in different use case scenarios. So I've got one client that's super competitive with Jiu Jitsu. Actually, he's like number one in the world for his age and weight class. And he just competed in a tournament in Singapore. His name's Jay Horley. He's a rock star. But he's a type 1 diabetic. So he's been doing keto so that he doesn't have as much, blood sugar dysregulation or insulin requirements going into a tournament. So he's able to just have
Interesting.
much more consistent energy. So we've been tweaking things and like tracking all the data. He's got a CGM, and it's cool because he's competing at like 84 kilogram weight cap, and we've got him down below that slightly, but he's able to eat more food, not have any blood sugar dysregulation, and not have to do those crazy weight loss cuts that you see wrestlers in high school doing with sauna suits and spitting in the can all day long. So it's healthier for him for sure, and it works. So it's just cool to see that play out.
That's incredible. Have you noticed if he's competing in Singapore? I'm assuming he did the Asian Open for IBJJF. Was that the comp he did?
Yeah, he's got like I don't know the different competitions. That's his world and yours, not mine. But he's got several more. He's got a big tournament in August. He's got a couple in August, and then he's got a really big one. Like the main one's in. Let me see if I can look because you would know it for sure. The big one, I believe, is in November. Let's see here. All right, so August 8th and 23rd, September 5th, September 7th, and then the big one is November 19th and 22nd. I'm not sure where that is. I guess that's like Worlds or somewhere or another.
So if he's competing, so the one you mentioned in August, the end of August, that might be Masters Worlds, which is in Vegas. That's a huge tournament. And then I'm not sure about the other ones. Thankfully, what's cool about the hockey stick effect with jiu-jitsu is that if someone wanted to, they can compete every single weekend for the entire year. And like there's competitions everywhere.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Now I'm excited, man. I'm excited to dive into it. And I have so many friends that are doing it, like Andrew's big into it. He introduced me to you, and Seema. Like everybody I know either knows somebody or has done it themselves. And I feel like once I let the bug, like I've intentionally not gone because I know that I'm just going to be like hook, line, and sinker in. And I don't want it to distract from bodybuilding. But once I get in it, man, it's going to be like the gloves are off, so to speak,
Yeah. Yeah. How much longer do you see yourself competing at the highest level in bodybuilding?
Man,
I'm sure you'll probably like be bodybuilding for the rest of your life, but as far as like competing, how long do you think that's going to be?
Man, I want to keep rocking it, man. Like I just had a podcast last week with Lisa Lum, who is 3 times world champion. She just turned 62,
Oh my gosh.
So like the cool thing about natural bodybuilding is like there's no reason you couldn't keep doing it as long as you're doing it the healthy, right way. And I feel like what I'm excited about in my realm of, ketogenic nutrition is that there's not a lot of poster childs for what this does long term. And you got people like Mark Sisson that's oftentimes pointed to as the guy that's super healthy at an older age. But it's like nothing against Mark. But I mean, if I've been bodybuilding since I was in high school, like I'm going to have a much more impressive physique by the time I'm 72 years old, So I just want to keep rocking it as long as I can.
For sure. I hear you. That's awesome, man. That's freaking sick. Yeah. If you started jujitsu and just like sprinkled it in outside of bodybuilding prep, like you're already so in tune with your body, I'd imagine very quickly you'd get a good hang of it and be able to auto-regulate your training and be able to pretty seamlessly blend it all together.
Yeah, I'll do it, man. I'll hit you up because I'm in Sacramento every once in a while too. It's like I was at Mark's gym and podcasting, I guess, a couple months back. So if you're right there in Sacramento, man, I'll hit you up next time I'm in town. You can
absolutely.
show me a few things.
Absolutely. That'd be great.
Awesome, brother. Where do people go to find out more about you, man?
You guys can find me at Joshua Settlage, basically anywhere. You can check out my podcast, the Settlage Strength Podcast, on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff. And then if you do jujitsu and you want to get started on enhancing your grappling athleticism, I have a free training course that can help you out. Over the next 30 days, we'll take care of everything you need to kickstart your grappling athleticism, from strength training, nutrition, mobility, recovery, all that stuff. And that's at thestrengthmatrix.com.
Awesome. I'll link out to that. You got a lot of cool stuff on your IG too. Like you do a really good job at showing what like landmine row movements and how to apply that to grappling. Like it all works well together. So keep doing what you're doing there, man.
Thank you, man. Appreciate that.
Pleasure as always, Josh. Looking forward to keeping the conversation going, brother.
Yes, sir. Catch you later.
See you, man. Take care.